Welcome to Social Capital Expert, a show where we discover the value of social capital and how cultivating strategic relationships is critical to our success. In each episode, your host, Sarah Frances McDaniel, will explore the stories of fascinating people from all over the world to better understand how their ability to build relationships has led to their success. We will uncover tips, tricks, and practical ways that you too can become a social capital expert. Hi, and welcome to the show. I'm so excited about today's guest, Jonathan ALPERT. Thanks for coming, Jonathan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So you have so much that we can talk about, but before we get too focused on what you're doing right now, will you give us a little bit of background and tell us a little bit about maybe where you're from and kind of where you got started?
For sure. Yeah, so born and raised in Denver. I'm one of the lucky natives.
Another native.
High
five.
Another native. But who I've had a great opportunity to watch the city grow. Being in the real estate world, it's been pretty fascinating to see it move and grow, especially being here in the early 80s and 90s when Denver was a very different place. So it's been fun to do that. My background, grew up in a home building family, and should have paid attention as a younger kid to what my family did, what my dad did, but ultimately ended up in the real estate world really by happenstance. Landed in a brokerage job doing retail brokerage, and really learned about a city that I really never knew as the city was changing and becoming urbanized, right? And so that's really what propelled me into the business, and I really found a passion for design, and I'm a design nut, design dork, whatever you want to call it, but that's really what fuels my passion for real estate and has allowed me to progress through the years, from brokerage to the different stages of development that I've been.
So did you go to school for development, or what did you go to school for?
No, I got a business degree in Atlanta at Emory University, small little school, and again, the same kind of thing. I wish I had listened to your parents. Listen to your parents.
Advice number one.
No, a business degree, and then really I spent a year in Australia after college before coming back to Denver, and their harsh climate really exposed me to design elements and how that plays into homes and into residential living, just quality of life, sun exposure, and it's, again, being in Australia, the environment was so harsh that it's something I hadn't thought about,
right?
And that as I started to get my brain set on, well, one day you need to get it together and make a living and all that really just started to push me and got me thinking about modular and all those kind of things. And really that's what excited me and pushed me into the development world. Awesome.
Okay, so you came back from Australia,
yep.
And then what happened?
I started at a retail brokerage firm called Sullivan Hayes and represented retail tenants and shopping centers.
You started that?
Well, that's where I started.
You started there.
Yeah.
Okay, I was oh my God, you learned something new.
No, long-time company. I was lucky to get a job there, but I spent 2 years there, and again, I did not love brokerage. It was not my forte. It was not my style. But I learned about the city. That's really what happened. I remember calling my dad at 22 years old, and it's before Google,
right?
Early stages of Google, but I'd be downtown and the grid's all goofy, and I'm like, Dad, how do I get the hell out of here? I'm trying to learn the streets and learn the retail and where there's opportunity. So so started in that business, spent 2 years doing it, and again, did not love the business, but I started to learn where there was opportunity, and really got exposed to a city that was in its infancy, and that pushed me into development. I went from there and worked for a company called DTC Meridian, which is now Shea Properties. I spent 5 years there and worked on the development side, did everything from medical office to land sales to retail development, but it was beyond an incredible learning experience. I needed to learn. I needed to get my ass kicked. I needed to be accountable, and so it was one of those jobs where I show up every day, fight the battle, but I learned from incredible people at that company, and most of our stuff was suburban, right? It was Highlands Ranch, it was Reunion, it was Tech Center proper, and which is where I grew up, and so it was a little, again, all this stuff is good, but I wasn't passionate about it. I learned a ton and I loved what I was doing, but not in the areas that really got me excited.
Okay.
And then that ultimately led to me going out on my own, in 2010, which was an interesting time to go out, right? You had the financial crash, real estate was slow, and it was hard to convince people that they should make these investments coming out of that. But I had a great comfort in our urban core and young people moving to Denver and starting to talk about moving to Denver not because of the mountains, but because of the city. It was the first time I'd heard that in my life, that people were like, oh, I want to visit Denver. It wasn't passing through. And so, I felt like I was in the right place, but it took a minute to get people, excited about it and willing to invest. But
so what was that first big development you did on your own?
So the first big development I did on my own was a project called Verve, which had many iterations previous to what it ultimately has been called. But it was a piece of land at 15th and Delgany, so right by the Museum of Contemporary Art. The museum was relatively new at that time, and Union Station was kind of just going. Riverfront was there, and Glass House, and like that stuff was happening, but Highlands was really coming into its own, and it was in the way. 15th and Delgany, Pepsi Center, Union Station, because the redevelopment hadn't happened yet.
Right.
But it felt like a great site, and we entitled the project. The zoning was there, but we put a plan together, multifamily piece, and ended up selling it off to Amstar. So great deal, great first deal, but it was one of those things. Hindsight is 20/20, and you can never look back. But we should have built it ourselves. But young, stupid, didn't know what we really could pull off.
Right.
But it worked out great, and that kept me kind of moving into the urban space.
And now since then, you've done a number of projects, some of which I've had the opportunity to be involved in on a bit. And one thing I just so admire about you, Jonathan, is you're a trailblazer. You are willing to go into places and to go into situations and blaze the trail. And you have a couple of projects going on now where I feel like, we've had some conversations about the importance of just education when you're trailblazing.
Sure.
And keeping people abreast of that. Right. Do you want to share anything about sort of some of the projects you've done since that first project and some of those?
Yeah, for sure. Trailblazer, I appreciate that. But,
you are a trailblazer.
No, it's just going where the puck is moving, right? Like where it's going to end up. We are lucky we live in this city that has really unbelievable infrastructure. And so, if you put a dot on Denver, central Denver, Lodo, the financial district, whatever, it's not rocket science, right? Where the areas are going to be and where the growth is going. And so, it's been opportunity to play in those arenas. And the being early in those neighborhoods is interesting, because you have an opportunity to affect really positive change. But at the same time, there's always issues with that. There is displacement. There's folks that don't want to see change, and so you try, like I try personally, like crazy, to engage with those communities and make sure the projects are authentic, and not everybody's going to like them.
Right.
It doesn't matter, right? There are people that just say no and don't like them, and I certainly understand that. But that's been the greatest challenge, but also the absolutely the best result, and like that super hokey, but the community piece of it, when you see people show up in a place that they weren't before and start to engage and build a life in that area, in that neighborhood that I try to build places, be involved in places that I want to be at and live at and experience. And most of our tenants or homeowners in certain places, I'm sure, are tired of seeing me, because I'm always around. But I think that's a critical piece to that. If you're going into these neighborhoods, you gotta be there.
And I've seen you in some of your neighborhoods when I'm hanging out there, so I know that's true. So you bring up an interesting topic, and one of community.
Yep.
And I think that is definitely a theme that runs through the projects that I know of that you're a part of. How do you believe you build community, or what are some of those key kind of pieces of creating community in those spaces?
Sure. I mean, there's two communities. I mean, there's many more than that you have to deal with, but you've got the existing community around you, which is critical. And I mean, we live in a strange time. I mean, social media and people have the ability to say no a lot, and
right.
a lot. They can do a lot of yelling and screaming without repercussion,
right.
and just get behind the computer and get very tough. And so that community is tough because there are people that embrace it, and I've experienced this at Spark in
right.
particular, right?
Right.
It's a site that had a lot of history, so I knew what I was getting into, and it's got all kinds of convergence of societal issues, right?
Right.
And so it wasn't lost on me. I knew what I was getting into, but you have that piece of the community where people are they're just not going to like what you do regardless of what you're doing. Even if it's their idea, they're still going to find an issue with it. So I've struggled with that, but just keep showing up and keep answering questions and keep trying to, I can only do my best and try to make everyone happy. Doesn't always happen. So
right.
that's the existing community. So, but how do you engage otherwise in those communities? I mean, people are going to say no, so you kind of, hey, just take it. And then, but I've had opportunities in particular in that community, Redline, at Art
right.
Gallery that had been there for 10 years prior, doing amazing work, and I was able to get very involved with them and participate with them, and vice versa. So I think it's just a matter of diving deep and again just being there. So that's that community. But then you have the community that you're building,
right?
That little the micro community that you're building, and that part is beyond important to me, because people are trusting me. Like, that's deep within me, is especially on homeownership, right? I mean, anything, businesses, you're putting your life on the line.
Right.
I want to do right by you and provide you with something that you can stand behind and that you feel comfortable with. And so that is, the greatest joy, but also the greatest challenge, for sure. Keeps me up at night.
Interesting, and I think it's such an interesting trend that it seems like, and I'm curious if you agree with this, but I feel like anytime I'm going to these development conferences or sitting in on any of this stuff, the real conversation is around experience, it's around community, it's around engagement.
Totally.
Do you find that has shifted a bit in the development community over the last?
Big time. Yeah, I think everything is about experience. It really is, and in all product types. We're doing industrial in a pretty heavy way at the moment. It's not my day-to-day world,
right?
But within the company, watching the plans and watching the development and conversations, people expect something different, and that's in the experience. So even though it's industrial property, as that market morphs and becomes, it's always had showroom activation, but even more so, and that showroom becoming retail, and so you have these major mixes, even in asset classes that traditionally didn't have that.
Yeah.
And so we talk a lot about, what is the worker going to feel like when they're on site in this warehouse, and how do you engage in open space, and how do you make these places great for the user, great for the customer and the tenant and the owner. So it goes both ways. But yeah, the experience is everything. Everything we look at, whether it's retail, especially retail, like, how do you get people coming back? Online is the killer, right?
Yeah.
So we call it, we have an acronym for it, like everything, but internet resistant retail.
Oh.
So like Stanley.
Okay.
Stanley, we consider internet resistant retail, because you have to show up. It's the experience that's driving you there. You don't know what you're going to see. There's going to be some activation, some flash mob, in the common areas, or some kind of, farmer's market, whatever the case may be. But that goes across all asset classes, everything.
Yeah, so not knowing what, you have to actually be present to experience it. It's not something that you can do digitally.
Right. Or just, the brand experience. We're seeing a lot of retailers want a little pop-up, just because so that they can engage with the customer. And a lot of it's even on returns. You order something online, shoe doesn't fit, so you go there, but you engage with that brand. And so now that brand, all of a sudden, yes, you're going to continue to buy online. They don't need the brick and mortar like they used to.
Right.
But it's a place to experience a brand and get excited about what's forthcoming. And if you've got the right people telling that story, stay relevant.
Interesting. And so you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but the theme that continues to come up through even the things you're talking about how you reflect to the projects that you're doing and wanting to make sure that it's win-win for the customer as well as the people who are there. And it all sounds like it sort of comes down to these interactions between human beings. Sure. And the value of that interaction. Yeah.
I mean, without a doubt. I mean, that is the core of it. Is speaking specifically to home ownership. Being from a home builder, watching that as a kid and not even realizing what I was watching and learning, but what I soaked in was, these people trust you and making the largest purchase that they will likely ever make in their life. And it's real. That's real. And so that interaction, that that human touch, people can get a hold of me day and at 2 a.m. I answer the call if there's an issue with a project, and I get asked a lot, especially younger millennial employees that are like, why do you do that? You shouldn't do that. I'm like, should or not, it doesn't matter. I will. I'm going to. I'm going to make sure that I'm available, that I can answer a question, and that that at the end of the day, that's all we have. We have our relationships, we have our reputation, and that is the most important thing. So I will continue to answer those calls regardless. But that and it's it's that way with the city interaction. It's that way with political interaction. It's that way with I have an amazing relationship with a couple commanders at the Denver Police Department. Just working in the Curtis Park, 5 Points neighborhood. Right. But they've been in an unbelievable relationship because they're out there dealing with really serious stuff, and they wonderful people. I mean, just fighting like all of us to do their job. So yeah, those relationships are everything for sure.
So you can hear the passion in your voice about what you do. Where do you think that passion comes from? Is it a passion for design, a passion for people, a passion to see something come to creation?
Yeah, all of the above? Yeah, it's all of it. It's all. I mean, yes, it's definitely the design. I read all the magazines, or I shouldn't say read. I look at them, and look at the pretty pictures, and I pull them out. But it is the design. I mean, it's a want to elevate the city and push the city and do interesting things where people get really excited about being a part of it. So yeah, it's design. It's and it's really that community drive. It's making great places. Really trying to make great places. Stanley as an example. When I see families and kids and interacting and dinners and just people making their life, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a cool way to sit back and watch all of that happening and know that you really were a big piece of that. A big piece of starting the catalyst for everything that's happening there now. Now, so in the theme of social capital and sort of the power of our network, can you give us sort of some examples or some times in your life or maybe some transitions that have taken place that those relationships that you had in the community and in the industry and in life were really what played a big role in those?
Yeah, I mean, it's every step of the way it has. I mean, it's really everything from the first job. It was a family friend who I ran into and had a quick conversation and said, "Hey, come try out brokerage." And that to Shea Properties was another relationship that I was able to call on and and seek out advice that turned into work. And then going out on my own and then transitioning back into a larger company. It was a relationship. A friend said, "You should meet these guys. They're looking at similar stuff." And a phone call and a couple conversations later, and so yeah, it's everything. I mean, these relationships. And that's a beautiful part of Denver is I feel like especially in the development community, it's very collaborative, and I can only imagine what, development looks like in larger cities that have already, that are largely already developed. I mean, I think the competition's extremely fierce and you probably don't get a lot out of each other. Yeah. I feel like we share a ton here, and good, bad, or otherwise, it feels very good. Even though we're competitors, I still feel like our community wants to, help each other up and hold each other up. And so, also from that standpoint, that social capital and being able to call, and a lot of these friends that are developers, whether it's Chris Lonegro or David Jodis or whomever, the ability to pick up the phone and call somebody that is dealing with the same thing you are, and just bounce it off the wall. I mean, it helps a ton.
And that's even a sense of community within your development.
For sure. And we're competitors.
Right.
But we also, we know that we also can help each other, and that's really critical.
That's awesome, and thank you for sharing that. And when you look at, developing social capital, do you have any key ingredients that you think have to be there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a willingness to talk, and be open and candid. I'm probably overly sharing, overly candid with my feelings, and with good things and bad things, and but I think it's a willingness to share. If you're vulnerable, I think people are, then they're willing to be the same way with you, right? And then you learn, then it's not all, sunshine. It's, this is a real issue and I need help. I mean, I think that willingness to open up and talk with somebody is really, really important, and just a willingness to meet. There are a lot of people that I'm too busy, and we all are. We're all very busy, especially in our cell phone days. But I think just a willingness to have a quick conversation is really important, and I'm always, I try to make myself available to anybody, any relationships or friends that ask, hey, talk with this young lady, talk with this fella, I always have to do it.
That's awesome, and I can attest to that. That's why you're here. So thank you so much for being willing to be on this show. You have a substantial network, and your reputation really precedes you, Jonathan. You've been involved in so many quality projects. You've blazed trails and sort of set the stage for others who come behind you. You really have, from my perspective, have been one of those people that consistently walks the walk and talks the talk. And in that, do you have any advice, as you kind of have looked over your journey, or something that you might tell your younger self now that you've sort of come this far?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I trust your gut. I mean, especially in real estate. It is definitely more of a feeling than it is that we can always make numbers look right on paper. I mean, Excel does wonderful formulas for you, and they're never going to be right. And so I think it's, fine-tuning stuff on paper and trying to make things work is, we all do that, but I think it's a matter, it's trusting your gut and just going with it. And if it's that passion. If you feel like, it doesn't mean they're always going to work, that all the projects are going to work, but as long as you're trusting your gut and doing what you believe in, that you get through it. You get through it, and like I said earlier, listen to your parents.
Listen to your parents.
That's
a good one.
They want the best for you, that's for sure. And now, and being a parent, I'm learning that. It took me a long time to understand that, but
yeah. Do you tell your kids?
I do. They don't
listen to your parents,
and they don't listen.
Well, thank you for sharing that. As we start to wrap up, and I appreciate you being here. Do you have any kind of final thoughts as far as just kind of looking over the whole picture of how relationships have been a piece of your overall success?
I think that's what we have in this world, is we have those relationships. When everything else fades and everything else goes away, we have our friends, we have our family, we have the people that we've, worked with over the years, and we always, and that stuff happens in different times, right? I mean, I have friends or coworkers from years past, and, but when you see them again and you remember those things, and that's what we have. And so, I think it's just important to make time for that, and again, just a willingness to talk and be open and make time for others, and make time for family and all that. I mean, it's just being there, being present, and that's and I should take my own advice, but I every single day I'm trying harder to put the phone down, put the computer down, and take a breath, and just and make time for those relationships. That's really important.
That's very important, and thank you for that tidbit of advice. I think there's a lot from just these few moments with you that we can take and apply to grow our own social capital. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
That's all for this episode of Social Capital Expert. Please visit socialcapitalexpert.com for show notes, additional episodes, and to see who will be visiting us next on the show. Also, be sure to check out our upcoming Social Capital Mixers. These are events where we can connect in person to build social capital. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to having you join us for the next episode.